Welcome to a presentation on neoclassical physics. Neophysics has the most accurate theories of physics. We challenge you to disprove us. If not, we welcome you to join us and profit from the new science. In this presentation, we mainly explore the errors created by grid resolution of the climate models. In the previous presentations, we saw how using the steady-state radiative equilibrium, also known as zero-dimensional energy balance models, gives wrong estimates of the surface temperature. We have to solve the actual full time varying radiative energy balance equation in order to get the correct estimates even in the simplest case of moon. We know that the moon is devoid of ocean or atmosphere, and even in that simple case we have to use the time dependent equations. And we also saw the errors induced in the diurnal time scale solar radiation distribution due to coarse gridding or the using the low resolution grid in a previous presentation. In this presentation, we discuss about the spatial and temporal resolution required to model these energy balance processes accurately on the annual time scale, that is including the seasonal cycle. So this figure here shows a non-tilted Earth, or we can consider this as moon as well, facing the sun. Assuming the sun at point A as a point source of light, if the distance between the Earth and sun, this line OA, is much larger than the radius of the Earth, this line OP, then the tangents originating from point A practically meet at the poles. The local solar insolation angle at noon time will be equal to its latitude phi, defined with respect to the spherical coordinate system located at O at the center of the Earth. Points N and S are the north and south poles, and EQ is the equator. This shaded bluish region indicates the night side or night time if the object is rotating. And this cyan color region is facing the sun. So this is the day side or the daytime region. The radiation intensity at some longitude theta and some latitude phi is simply calculated as this: I equals I naught into cos theta cos phi. If the object is rotating, then we include this omega t factor. This omega is the rate of rotation or the angular velocity of Earth. On the night side or the nighttime region, the radiation intensity is zero everywhere. So this is how we include the diurnal or the day-night variation in the equation. So according to the prevalent climate 101 theory, the surface temperature of a celestial object in the solar system devoid of any atmosphere is determined by the following equation. Basically, this is the zero-dimensional energy balance equation, or also called the steady-state radiative equilibrium equation, and this is independent of time. So this is the equation: pi r square I naught into 1 minus alpha equals 4 pi r square sigma t power 4. Here r is the radius of the celestial object, T is the surface temperature of the object, the global mean surface temperature of the object, I naught is the maximum input solar radiation intensity at the top of the atmosphere, which is usually taken as 1360 watt per meter square, and it is valid for both moon and Earth. Albedo is the alpha is the albedo factor or the reflectivity of the surface of the celestial object, and sigma is the Stefan Boltzmann constant. Thus, we get the estimated surface temperature as shown here. The temperature T is 4th root of I naught into 1 minus alpha by 4 sigma. So this equation implies that the temperature is 270.3 Kelvin, or about minus 3 degrees centigrade, when alpha equals 0.11, or we assume when 11% of the radiation is reflected back to space. From observations of moon, we know that even the average equatorial mean surface temperature of moon is much lower than this theoretical mean surface estimate that we just did. That is 270.3 Kelvin. The actual equatorial mean temperature of moon is 215.5 Kelvin. You can refer to this article, the global surface temperatures of moon as measured by the Diviner Lunar Radiometer Experiment by J.P. Williams and D.A. Page et al. So this article shows that even the hot equator, the hottest part of the region on the moon, is about 55 Kelvin lower than the predicted average temperature. That is, the predicted average is 270.3 Kelvin, as we saw here from the equation. But the observed is 215.5 Kelvin. So it's about 55 Kelvin lower than the theory. The overall surface average temperature is close to 200 or 205 Kelvin, which is about 65 to 70 Kelvin lower than the theoretical estimate made by the zero-dimensional energy balance model. So basically what it means is this zero-dimensional energy balance model highly overestimates the temperature, and we need to do better calculations to get the actual observed values. So instead of the steady-state equilibrium, radiative equilibrium equation, we should consider the full time-dependent radiation balance equation. Here, the input intensity term I naught is modified by two sinusoidal factor. One factor corresponds to the diurnal variation of the sunlight that creates day and night. And this can be considered as the longitudinal variation of the solar radiation. And the other factor is due to variation of the insolation angle due to latitude phi. So this equation, so this is the zero-dimensional equation which we used earlier. Now we use a better version. This is the time-independent form. We use the time-dependent form here. So basically, when we put this del T by del T, this time-varying part of the temperature 0, we get back this zero-dimensional equation that we used earlier. So in this equation, this sine of 2 pi t by x, this part is the longitudinal or shows the diurnal variation, and cos phi shows the latitudinal variation. So this equation is for the heating phase when the time is between 0 and x by 2, where x is actually the period of rotation or the angular velocity, the period of rotation, and for moon we take it as x equals 28 days, and for earth we take it as 24 hours. So also note that here theta is actually replaced by theta plus omega t when we consider the whole lat lon and the time variations. Basically we have to with time, when it is rotating, the longitude, the value on the longitude changes as theta plus omega t, and here omega is nothing but 2 pi by x, where x is the period of oscillation, period of rotation, and omega is the angular velocity. So this equation is the heating phase equation, and during the cooling phase we just there is no radiation coming in, the radiation intensity is 0, so we are just left with this minus sigma t power 4, this radiation loss, Stefan-Boltzmann radiation loss term, and this is the cooling phase which happens when the time is between x by 2 and x. And also note that the rho HC values here we use for the calculation of the moon, we use a soil layer. We assume that the moon is composed of soil. The density rho is used as 1600 kg per meter cube. C is the specific heat, and we use the value 730 joule per kg per Kelvin, and the height of these layer, these elemental surface units, is taken as 0.1 meter. So so from these equations, these two equations, we can calculate the local temperature T as a function of longitude, latitude, and time. also solving the equation numerically, we get the surface average temperature, that is the mean surface temperature of the moon, as about 210 Kelvin from these equations, from this time dependent equation. Solving this locally, just considering the local equilibrium, no heat conductivity, etc. Just each spot on the moon is responding to whatever the radiation it is getting throughout the time variation of that. So doing just the local balance, we get 210 Kelvin. Which is only about 5 to 10 Kelvin higher than the estimated average surface temperature of moon, which is about 205 Kelvin. So basically our calculations are broadly consistent with the observations by the Clementine long wave infrared sensor and also the Diviner lunar radiometer experiment. Actually, we also find that even the time evolution of the temperature of moon at each point, and also the latitudinal or longitudinal variation, we get all these estimates pretty close to the observation. And also we find that the portion of heat getting advected horizontally or vertically does not seem to be important for this first order approximation of the surface temperature. This one layer local equilibrium model described here produces the results close to the observation. It is much better than the zero dimensional model that we discussed earlier. And also note that in this for this calculation we need a resolution of less than or equal to 1 degree 2 hours. That is a latitude resolution of 1 degree, longitude resolution of 1 degree and a time resolution of 2 hours to get a stable temperature value. That is, stable means that is the resolution. If we use a more finer resolution or more higher resolution than this 1 degree 2 hours, then the calculated global average temperature does not change. It remains constant. But if we use a much lower resolution than this, say for example 5 degree and 24 hours, those kind of resolution, then we get a different temperature, which may be more or less lower than this temperature. So in order to get a stable mean temperature, we need to have a certain high resolution limit, and this is 1 degree. We need to have at least 1 degree 2 hours. So this is about the diurnal variation. Here we hadn't considered the tilting of this celestial object. Now let us move on to include the tilt of the tilted rotating Earth. That is, basically we are going to include the seasonal cycle that we see when we consider a whole year or whole annual variation of the solar radiation. So this figure shows the tilted Earth. This bluish circle at the center represents the tilted Earth. The points N and S on the outer circle shows the north and south poles of the untilted Earth, as we saw in the previous figure. And the points N subscript T and S subscript T on the inner circle shows the new position of the tilted north and south poles of the Earth. This angle phi naught here shows the amount of angle by which the Earth has got tilted from its untilted position. If in the frame of the Earth we measure the longitude as theta and latitude as phi, then at some time t we can map from angle theta and phi to angles that we see in the untilted frame. Suppose we name the angles that we measure in the untilted frame as theta prime and phi prime. So using these two equations, we can basically map from theta phi, that is angles measured in the frame of Earth, tilted Earth, and theta prime phi prime, which is the angle measured in the frame where the Earth is untilted. And also basically here theta means theta plus omega t, that is we take care of the rotation. And further, so by using these two equations and theta as theta plus omega t, using these two transforms, we can find theta prime and phi prime. So the sunlight intensity received at any point on the tilted Earth is simply given by I naught cos theta prime cos phi prime. using the transformed angles. So basically this will be on the day side, whereas on the night side the intensity is 0, so I is just 0 on the night side. We need not include this cos theta prime and cos phi prime factor there. So using this local radiative equilibrium at each grid point, using this equation, we get the temperature T at each grid point as a function of lat, ln and time. So when we calculate the temperature, these panels show the difference between the temperature calculated using the low resolution grid, that is 5 degree 1 hour grid on Earth, minus the temperature calculated using the high resolution grid, that is 1 degree 4 minutes. The temperature is calculated assuming a homogeneous layer of water with these ρHc values, ρHc parameters, and the equation used is the local radiative equilibrium at each grid point. No conductivity or no other processes, no other heat transfer process, just the local radiative equilibrium. So in the high resolution grid, we get the global annual radiation mean intensity as 340 watt per meter square, which is what we expect theoretically. Basically theoretically we expect I naught by 4, where I naught is 1360, so 1360 by 4 is 340 watt per meter square. So it's good. And the global mean temperature with this water layer, this ρHc, this layer we get is 271.3 Kelvin. But note that using the zero-dimensional energy balance model, we expect a temperature of 278.3 Kelvin with zero albedo effect or zero reflection of sunlight. So if we have assumed zero reflection, so in that case, if we use a zero-dimensional balance model, we get 278.3 Kelvin. But if we use this model with this water layer, then we get a temperature of only 271.3 Kelvin, which is quite less, which is 7 degrees less than 7 Kelvin less than the zero-dimensional model estimate. So we get the same mean temperature, 271.3 Kelvin, in both the high resolution and the low resolution case. But locally, in the low resolution case, we find large anomalies when we see the difference between the low resolution and high resolution values on individual days. So this panel, this top left panel is the difference between low resolution and high resolution temperature on day 1 when the sun is directly over the equator. The second panel is on day 41 when the sun is about 10 north, and this third panel is when is on day 81 when the sun is about 20 north. We see this checkered pattern of anomalies even in the annual average pattern shown in the last panel. So this is the annual average pattern. We see most of the differences are concentrated near the equatorial region, but overall there are these small regions where we find this checkered anomaly pattern throughout. But overall the mean temperature doesn't change, at least up to 1 decimal place, here shown 271.3 Kelvin. But we still see some little effect in the radiation intensity calculation. So the low resolution radiation intensity, the summation is average is slightly less than the high resolution intensity. These errors will matter more when the surface is not homogeneous. Here we have assumed homogeneous water surface, but when there is inhomogeneity on the surface, we see greater effect due to this errors in the tropical region. So we shall look at them later. Let us now look at the anomaly when we include conductivity. There is some heat transfer between grid points. So basically we add these two conductivity terms to the time-dependent energy balance equation, local radiative equilibrium equation. So this is the we add one zonal and meridional conductivity terms to this local radiative heat radiative equilibrium equation at each grid point. So there will be a transfer of heat from the equatorial region to the polar region overall, and from the day side to the night side. But when we take difference between the low resolution and the high resolution temperature, we find that the polar regions in the low resolution grid remain cooler compared to the higher resolution grid. This is because a significant portion of the heat in the equatorial region gets distributed zonally, more due to the anomalies we see in the equatorial region that we saw in the previous slide. So equatorial region has more anomalies, so in the low resolution grid, so much of the a significant portion of the energy gets distributed zonally, which also increases the overall temperature in the tropics, and reduces the overall temperature in the polar region in the low resolution grid. Still, the overall mean temperature remains the same, which is 272.3 Kelvin. So actually we see a 1 degree rise in the overall mean temperature when we include this conductivity factor compared to the pure local equilibrium equations which didn't have conductivity. And also we note that as conductivity becomes higher, as it becomes higher and higher and approaches infinity, the mean temperature increases towards the zero-dimensional model temperature, which is 278.3 Kelvin. So this is like the limit that we reach at very high conductivity. That means we in this zero-dimensional model, the implicit assumption is that the energy gets distributed throughout the planet instantly, and if that process is included, then we get a temperature of 278.3 Kelvin, which is much higher than this time-dependent model, what this time-dependent model gives. We find a small difference between the low-resolution grid temperature and the high-resolution grid mean temperature when we include the albedo feedback effect. So this is like the ice albedo feedback effect. We are just using the mechanism here to see how sensitive the model is. So there is no actual ice being created. This is just an ideal experiment to see the effect of albedo feedback effect. So basically we assume that in these calculations, whenever the temperature goes below 210 Kelvin, which usually happens above 65 degree in the winter hemisphere. So whenever the temperature goes below 210 Kelvin, we say that we include an altered albedo effect. That is, we assume that 40% of the incoming solar radiation is reflected back whenever the temperature is below 210 Kelvin. So we multiply the intensity value I with 0.6. So wherever there is a non-zero value, it reduces, only 60% of the value is taken, it reduces by 40%. So when we include this albedo feedback mechanism, the difference between the low resolution and the high resolution grids become enhanced in the polar regions, as seen here. The low resolution grid has a negative anomaly above 40 degrees in both hemispheres. That is 40 north to the polar region 90 north has a negative anomaly, and also 40 south to 90 south also has a negative anomaly in this low resolution grid. And the overall mean temperature of the low resolution grid is 0.1 Kelvin lower. Basically the high resolution grid surface mean temperature is 271.2 Kelvin, and the mean temperature of the low resolution grid is 271.1 Kelvin. So there is a 0.1 Kelvin difference, and this purely comes because of the lower resolution of the grid. Here we further alter the experiment. Here we see the effect of including some asymmetry on the surface. Previously we had assumed a homogeneous water layer on the surface. Now we introduce a patch of soil layer on the surface with different rho HC values. So we introduce a 30 degree by 30 degree box in the equatorial region and a patch of 30 degree by 20 degree at the poles. which have a soil layer. This equatorial region, the box in the equatorial region, the patch of soil in the equatorial region, is mainly responsible for an additional 0.1 Kelvin difference we find in the mean temperature between the high and the low resolution grids. So in this case, the low resolution grid has a mean temperature of 270.7 Kelvin, and the high resolution grid has a mean of 270.9 Kelvin. So there is a net difference of 0.2 Kelvin, of which 0.1 Kelvin difference is coming due to the albedo feedback effect that we saw in the earlier slide. And here, due to this introduction of this soil patch, another 0.1 Kelvin difference is created. So the net is 0.2 Kelvin, and only 0.1 is due to the soil patch. And we can also note that if we introduce another 5-6 such soil patches in the tropical region, then the temperature becomes the temperature difference between the low and the high resolution grid can become as big as the estimated global warming in the last 100 years. That is, it can easily go 0.7, 0.8 Kelvin. For example, also we can note that, for example, in early 1900s and late 1800s, the data coverage we had of, say, the solar radiation variability or the variability of surface temperature or other weather variables was pretty poor. Especially in the southern oceans, it was very, the data availability was very, very low. So even if we interpolate these data sets and use some physical based models to fill up the gaps in the available data, and finally we are able to find out the global mean surface temperature using those limited data sets earlier in 100 years ago. Even if we do all this filling and modeling, the effective resolution will remain poor because the basic data set is poor. And by the time we reach the year 2000, 100 years later, we start getting much higher resolution, much better quality data sets. So effectively the earlier part of the models will effectively have a lower resolution than compared to the later part of the model in later in year 2000. So this resolution change, this changing resolution may itself cause few tenths of a degree warming, as we saw in this changing model resolution and the changing data resolution itself could be causing some of the warming. And this few tenths of a degree warming is quite significant compared to the warming from the model-based studies in the last 100 years. So the models predict over the last 100 years the warming has been about, say, 0.8 Kelvin or something, and these differences, these few tenths of a degree difference that we get between the low resolution and the high resolution grid is of the same order. So the models may be pretty inaccurate. I mean, the effect could be coming from this change of resolution also. And further, we see that there is quite a bit of discrepancy in the way that solar radiation values have been estimated or used in the models. For example, from this 2004 publication, this solar radiative output and its variability, evidence and mechanisms by Klaus Froelich and Judith Lean. In this article, they note that they basically reconstruct longer scale, decadal or centennial scale solar radiation variation from 1600 to 2000, year 2000. So basically they do this irradiance reconstructions based on postulates of some source of long-term irradiance variability on multidecadal to centennial time scales based on circumstantial evidences like geomagnetic activity and cosmogenic isotopes. So using these proxies, geomagnetic activity or cosmogenic isotopes, they recreate the amount of solar radiation that was found in, say, 1600, in 1700, in 1800, so on. And in this reconstruction, we roughly see that over the last 100 years, from 1900 to 2000, there has been a total rise of 2.5 watt per meter square in the average solar radiation received at the top of the atmosphere. So this is quite significant, 2.5 watt per meter square change. And these small variations, high frequency variations that we see is the 11-year cycle. And it also shows longer decadal, multi-decadal variations. And also further, the same group by Judith Lean, in 2011 they found out that the most accurate value of the total solar irradiance during the 2008 solar minimum period that was measured was 1360.8 watt per meter square. This was measured by NASA. And this value is significantly lower than the canonical value of 1365.4 watt per meter square established in the 1990s, and this value which energy balance, so most of the models use this value 1365 watt per meter square currently. So most of the models have been using 5 watt per meter square excess radiation than necessary. And also instrument accuracies are a significant source of uncertainty in determining the Earth's energy balance or energy imbalance from space-based measurements. A radiation imbalance at the top of the atmosphere is indicative of climate forcing, and the current planetary imbalance is nominally estimated to be about 0.85 watt per meter square by Hansen et al. In 2005. But the estimates of this radiation imbalance quantity from space-based measurements range from 3 watt to 7 watt per meter square. So model expectation is 0.85, but from instruments we are measuring 3 to 7 watt per meter square, which is a wild variation. The newer data sets, as described of this 2008 and later data set, these newer data sets reduce this discrepancy to 1 watt per meter square. But still, this is comparable to the estimate of the current estimate of the energy imbalance. So the error signal is as big as the signal itself. So given these inaccuracies in solar radiation estimates, and also lack of proper data coverage 100 years ago, that is, we had very poor quality, low resolution data sets 100 years ago. So given these constraints, it may actually be impossible to get the accuracy required to predict the effect of the CO2 rise. We may basically not have enough good coverage of data sets, high enough resolution data sets, in order to even make this estimate of the total warming caused by the CO2 effect. So with that, we end this presentation here. Thank you. If you want to understand the concepts of physics in the clearest way, regardless of the concerns about scoring high marks in exams, please visit neophysics.com. Thank you.